Media recognition from Bloomberg, Reuters, recycling trade publications. Patented process for 100% recovery of critical metals, including cobalt, lithium, nickel, manganese, aluminum. American Manganese is focused on recycling lithium-ion batteries for electric vehicles. American Manganese trades on the TSX Venture, AMY, the US, AMYZF, and Frankfurt 2AM. For more information, visit AmericanManganeseInc.com or phone me, Larry Ray, at 778-574-4444.
You're listening to HowStreet.com radio, available online at TalkDigitalNetwork.com. Welcome to HowStreet.com radio, the online source for market opinions. Here is Jim Goddard.
My guest is Mark Leibovit, editor and publisher of the Leibovit VR newsletters, also known as VRTrader.com. Mark, welcome back to the show.
Glad to be here. Thanks for having me.
Mark, do we have a special offer for our listeners?
We do. It is at Leibovit VR newsletters, but the shortcut URL is VRTrader.com, Victor Robert, VRTrader.com, and when you go to any of the newsletters, you can enter the promo code 2021 half off and get 50% off of any of the newsletters. And we are, as I mentioned last week, close to launching our special new year-end opportunity letter, which is going to just highlight some stocks that we feel could have a bounce into the new year. And we're pretty excited about it. We had a pretty good showing last year that just trades, probably a 30 to 60 day play once a year. And that should be hopefully coming out in November. So 2021 half off to answer your question for the promo code.
One of the things that people have been asking me is China as tough as they talk. And I believe you were the one who mentioned your contacts were saying they were having not just riots and demonstrations about Evergrande, but some communities in China are short on food. And does the government really have a handle on things there? And even if they have a violent crackdown, have they forgotten that China's modern government was born out of a people's revolution? It is the People's Revolutionary Army.
Well, let's hope the CCP is going to be a demise situation. Anything is possible. I don't know if it's going to happen that fast, if at all, but we sure hope it does. But yes, it's not really covered in the press. We don't get, the press that we get basically in the West is, edited or, ignored, and we don't get the stories from overseas, but there are food shortages in China. Their crops aren't coming in. They're predicting it could get worse. So, as I mentioned last week, and speculation on my part, the fear of an atomic attack unless Korea does something because they're crazy altogether. But unless on their part, they wouldn't want to do anything like EMP or atomic stuff because they need our country to grow food. I mean, that's really what it's all about. So, how they take us over or gain control, I would just think if they were smart, they just buy all the food, rather than try to take over the country. But they have other motives, so they want to control the world. They have this plan that apparently started way back in the 1940s or 50s to do what they're doing now. I mean, apparently there was a plan to take over the U.S. and the West, and it was a 40, 50-year plan or 100-year plan. And we tend not to think of the short term because we're always worried about next week and the market volatility and the short-term elections. You think about it, it's so smart they have a president who's in for life, and we have to worry. It seems like every day we're talking about the next election. And, not that I want to see a dictator or someone like that in Canada or the U.S., but if you think about it, with all this nonsense with the politics and fighting among the parties, and every 2 years policy changes because you got differing forces at work, things don't get done, so maybe having one person there, but unfortunately our system doesn't work that way, but that might be the way they can achieve their goals. Is not having, conflict among the other politicians. You got one guy and they're on a track to do what they're doing, and they seem to be succeeding, militarily, economically. Just they don't have the food. So, anyway, it's interesting what's going on.
Well, North Korea doesn't have the food either.
Yeah.
And that's what makes despot regimes scary, because maybe a modern example in 1980, 81, we had the Falklands War, where again Britain gave Argentina every opportunity to back down. They took 90 days to get there when they could have been there in 9. And Argentina at the time was having an economic crisis. People weren't getting enough food. And what better way to get the people's minds off empty stomachs than to declare war on, even though it's not a superpower anymore, Britain still can hold its own, and the Royal Navy's nothing to trifle with. I mean, it was just to distract their people from the fact their economy was crashing. Nazi Germany, invented because they had a horrible economy. Well, unite the country against a common enemy and declare war. That'll focus them on the fact that maybe they're not getting enough food or they can't buy the products they want. So why not invade Taiwan on China's part?
Right, that's sort of the big question mark. What's going to happen with Taiwan? They are flexing their muscles. I can't help but believe they won't try it. That will happen at some point, rather sooner than later. And the question is, if it happens, how are we going to react? How are the stock market going to react? So one of the plays would be to short the Taiwan ETF representing the Taiwan companies. If you believe something like that is coming, I think there's a good chance it could, because they are confident and arrogant, and they have been expanding in the South Sea. So this should be interesting, but I think the markets would be affected negatively short term. So let's see what happens here. But a lot of stuff going on over there. We just have to pay attention to it. But I think it's, I felt a long time ago, and many others share the view that this is the century for China, and we're losing, power in the world. We're losing respect in the world. We're destroying our dollar. Crazy politicians here trying to change the Constitution that was the benchmark for everything else. And it seems like China will eventually prevail the way things are going.
Well, every time Canada criticizes China's human rights record, China correctly points out Canada's record with Aboriginal people hasn't exactly been a shining example to the rest of the world for the last 100 years.
Same in the U.S., of course, right? It was genocide to the Native Americans that here, and when they all talk about slavery here before the Civil War, and they always point fingers how we're all so bad. But, we can't change history. People evolve and change. So, for the time being, that's the story, We just have to accept everything and then move forward. But anyway, as far as the economies and stuff, I think agriculture should continue to do well. So if you want to be long agriculture, ETFs and stuff as we are, I think there's an opportunity there, because this is sort of a money show. We're trying to figure out how we benefit from this. And if the shortage is there, prices go up. We're seeing that in crude oil. We talked about this last few weeks. It still seems to want to go higher, possibly a lot higher. So shortages and inflation just create opportunity, and we're trying to participate as best we can.
The International Energy Agency has pointed out there's a lack of investment for oil and gas exploration because we've seen so many pension funds, at least here in Canada, decide that oil and gas is evil, so they're not going to invest in it. But is that a short range point of view? You may have a goal in mind, and maybe you don't want to contribute to greenhouse gases, but what do you do between the time that solar and perhaps new nuclear, although they're against that as well, becomes viable? Wind farms do get becalmed. We still don't have efficient ways to store energy generated by solar and wind. Another energy source being, I think, almost totally ignored are the tides that we have. The Bay of Fundy in Nova Scotia has the world's highest tides. They, I think, have some kind of a hydro plant, but they always have problems with it. Here in British Columbia, we have large and variable tides that are different all along the coast because of Vancouver Island, but it's an energy source that's not even being used. There's one fishing camp, I think, that has a barge that can generate enough power for 5,000 homes, but it's just for one fishing camp. So right. we do have good alternative energy out there, but in the meantime, until it becomes reliable, because Europe's finding out the hard way that no, it's not reliable, it's not efficient, and it's not affordable.
The time factor, time lag is getting all these things on board. Even if you want to do a nuclear plant, you want to understand it takes more than 10 years to get one built or approved, maybe longer than that. So just when the lights go out, and, people realize they need to go back to other sources of energy. I mean, coal has been doing better. I mean, the previous, it was at the Obama administration, and I'm sure Biden feels that way, eliminate the coal business, and now they're finding out they need that. It's really insane when you think about what's going on out there. I mean, it's nice objectives to think that you can be energy independent, but, I don't see the negatives of all these, the geo-generated fuels. I mean, natural gas. I mean, there are apparatus to clean and, prevent pollution. It is an energy source. It's been around, forever. I think it's a balance of a little bit of everything, and just unfortunately, politics takes charge. But you're right. We're not going to have enough solar power and wind power to, and where we're going to get all the electric power to fuel these EV vehicles that everybody wants to see in the next 20 years. And some car manufacturers are suggesting they're going to be totally making EV vehicles. Well, if you can't plug it in and charge it without enough electricity being generated, that's going to be something else to see. So, I think I'm going to keep my gas-powered vehicle for a while.
Well, in California, they had blackouts related to the forest fires there, and people were told to park their electric vehicles because the power grid just couldn't support them. And it's not like that's the majority of vehicles in California. It's what 1 or 2%?
So what's going to happen only time will tell, about the power and where you're going to get it. But meanwhile, you're getting a short squeeze, so to speak, on the energy that's needed. So there's opportunity out there, and, maybe politics will change, maybe the realization will come that these are idiotic concepts to completely try to change everything overnight. It's really a 100-year type transition. It's not a 20-year, which is what everybody's promoting, that by 2040 or something, we're going to be totally energy independent from fossil fuels. I don't know. To me, we're not showing any respect to the dinosaurs, I guess.
Well, yeah, myself and a friend, we wrote a song about I can't afford to drive my Ford no more. And one of the lines I wrote was, I can't believe that we would be paying so much for a bunch of old dinosaur guts. Because we keep hearing things that it'll be $100 a barrel, $200 a barrel, because if they're not exploring for new oil, it's going to cost you a whole lot for the oil we do have.
But that's what I think could happen. I mentioned I could even see $400 a barrel, but that could be a 5-year comment. I mean, if things don't change, it can get really nasty out there, and that doesn't help the economy. I mean, it's a tax on working people and in industry too for oil to explode. The airline industry, of course, everyone is still so dependent on. I don't see any airplanes flying on solar energy yet. So, or nuclear. I mean, they do have military does have nuclear vehicles in space and on the seas, but they haven't done that. Why not create a nuclear automobile? You know what I mean? They're afraid that the, radioactivity and so forth, but, there are ships at sea that have self-contained nuclear plants that fuel them for years at sea, submarines. I mean, that's an alternative, and, it's inexpensive,
If you use helium as a coolant, you don't have radioactivity spreading because it can't become radioactive. It doesn't have the electrons.
Well, that's interesting, sure. Well, hydrogen is starting to come back too, so quite a bit. There's lots of companies. There's a hydrogen ETF now. I think the ticker symbol is HGEN, and there's a push toward hydrogen. So we're going to find out who's going to win out and whether it's really a contest or not. I don't know, but there is some opportunity out there. Look at Tesla stock. It got back to $900 a share, and trading today is back to its all-time high, and I think that's really equivalent, if I'm not mistaken, to $3,000 a share before the split. A lot of stuff that's happening that's money-making opportunities. But, I guess you don't want to only talk about money. You want to talk about, the general economy, and you want to talk about clean air and all these other things. But we're unfortunately or fortunately, we're sort of market people. And it's really funny, Jim, because for so many years I'm saying to myself, will market really last? And do I have to find another career at some point in my life? If the market goes to hell and I got to work for the post office or something because there's just going to be nothing out there, or the economy is going to be so bad and the markets are just not going to be a place that you can make a living. And it's just unbelievable over the decades, how things come up like this, whether it's solar stocks, uranium stocks, agricultural stocks, energy, EV type plays like Tesla, cannabis stocks that were hot. I mean, there's always something that comes out of nowhere. I mean, it's suddenly, there's opportunity. So, and I'm sure there's plenty of technologies we haven't even heard about yet. Some may be ones that are generated by some of the secret government activity that are going to be released. So I'm sure something will come out. I mean, look what the internet did, to the big internet, .com situation, in the late 1990s. Suddenly .com came in and the whole industry and the whole world changed. So I'm sure other things are going to suddenly appear, whether it's .coms or some super science, discovery or release. They're going to keep it going. And, the Dow Industrials, where is it now, in 35,000? I mean, I'm sure it'll be 40, 50, 60,000 in the not too distant future. So, if you're in the market, you got to stay optimistic, and you don't need to worry about another career. That's for sure.
We'll have more with Mark Leibovit right after this.
Don't miss out. Stay informed. Receive the HowStreet.com weekly recap with thought-provoking podcasts, radio, and articles delivered to your inbox. Sign up for the HowStreet.com weekly recap on our homepage at HowStreet.com.
Welcome back. We're speaking with Mark Leibovit. Mark, is Bitcoin, after being approved as an ETF, going to go crazy from this point on?
I think it's going to go crazy anyway, and I've been bullish on it. It went to a new all-time high in trading today, and I've been sort of guessing that you might see 100,000 in it, and then some sources are saying 500,000 to 1 million is possible. So we'll just have to take it a step at a time. But it's funny about that ETF. You mentioned it because it's a little bit of a deceitful situation. The ETF is not backed by physical Bitcoin. In other words, there's nothing behind it other than the speculation that Bitcoin is going up. And in other words, if the real Bitcoin actually drops, it has nothing to do with what the ETF is doing. So it's like it's in gold. You got gold at a gold ETF, and it's supposed to represent actual ounces or blocks of gold stored somewhere that back the price of the actual ETF. So I guess in the gold market, unless with the futures or with the commodity paper market, maybe that's not even 100% kosher, but, at least there's some connection there. From what I understand, there's really nothing in the Bitcoin ETF. So it's not connected directly to it. It just mirrors what's happening supposedly in that market. And it's sort of a fraud when you think about it. I mean, it's not like you're not really getting the Bitcoin. You can't cash out your ETF if they deliver the coins to me. Some of the gold ETFs, not all of them have the ability to say, I'll sell my shares and I want physical delivery of the gold that's behind it. So it's a little bit of a deception, but it created speculation. The futures market, as you know, was trading before now, and people got excited. But I think it was going to go up anyway. It was in an uptrend. So it's just part and parcel to what's happening. It's a big move. This is a whole industry with the cryptos.
Now, I know we like to talk about Geo-Cosmic events, and I talked to Eric Haddock for our show This Week in Money, which will go online Saturday morning. And he also tracks things like Geo-Cosmic events. A Carrington event. He says solar activity right now is at a height. And we saw Northern Lights here in Vancouver, which is on the 49th parallel. That's pretty far south for that to be seen. But a Carrington event is when there's a mass ejection of solar mass towards the Earth. And that happened in 1859 on the weekend of September 1st. And it knocked out all the telegraph lines. That was the only thing electrical on Earth back then. If a similar thing happened now, and he said 2023 is most likely for that to happen if you just look at solar activity, how it wanes and gains over a 1.3 year cycle, or 1.1 or 11.1 year cycle. Anyway, how would that affect things if all of a sudden our electrical grid goes down? Would our economies collapse, or like most things, when bad things happen to humans, we're quick to bounce back?
Right. That's a very good question. From what I hear, I guess it depends how severe the solar activity is or flare and how much damage it does. But some of the, again, I'm not a scientist. I'm just reading reports that I'm getting from other sources. I mean, it could really knock things out. And how do you replace the grid and all the generating equipment that's tied to the components that could get fried? It could take quite a while to come out of it. And the big fear in that situation is that, we're not an agrarian economy. People at that time were out in the farms and more independent, and they can grow food. And I mean, this could really create a big problem in the supply chain for food. And, big things could come out of this. And it could take, I would think it would take months, if even that short period of time to rebuild and recover everything. I had read that there's technology out there that was offered to the electrical industry or to the technology industry that could shield such an event. And from what I understand, maybe you had told me this, is being ignored. And they don't seem to have the perspective that this is a risk. So that's why I focus on stuff. I mean, when you see, I talk about lunar activity and solar activity, you talk about a possible shift in the axis on the Earth, which has happened in the past, has caused, tremendous changes on the planet. Of course, we've had the ice ages and stuff, but, a polar shift, for example, could happen 10 minutes from now. I mean, the planet could shift a degree or two, and it could be a natural event in the course of the billions of years. But what it would do to us, it would just knock us on our back. I mean, if there's enough of a polar shift, we probably have 1,000-mile-an-hour winds, and if there's a shift, a shift in the continents and all this stuff, which could come to that. I mean, we're goners. So I think we can't predict it, but there has been an increase in earthquake activity, volcanic activity. There's a moon wobble situation. There is a lot of increased activity on the sun with the solar, and people get a little cocky. We're impervious to all this. They're so involved with the day-to-day, but we're just little specks of nothing on a planet in the middle of a universe which is so small compared to what else is going on. We sort of lose perspective that we're smaller than the ants. In terms of the scale of what's going on and what could happen to us. So the Carrington event, or whether it's a polar event, who knows what. I don't think it's global warming, that's for sure. It's something, the planet is going through changes, and we just have to hope, not to mention the risk of asteroids, and, there's been discovery or speculation about a planet called the 12th planet that's out there, a huge orbit that supposedly circles around every 3,600 years and is due sometime in the next couple centuries, maybe sooner. And what would that do to the Earth if they see some swinging around? Apparently in some of the Sumerian texts and stuff, they talk about the Anunnaki, these I guess a race of people that came from this other planet that came here and then left, and that was 3,600 years ago. You read all this stuff, and then there's some now scientific evidence that there could be more planets out there circling around well beyond Pluto, and it takes many, many lifetimes to see them to circumnavigate the sun, but there is gravitational forces there, and people ignore it. They say it doesn't mean anything. Well, look at the moon. I mean, it affects gravity on the Earth, tides, everything else. And I believe all the planets, whether it's Jupiter, Saturn, Venus, a lot of astrologers tie things into the movement of the planets. I believe there is a connection. In fact, there was this, I can't remember his name, and I apologize. He's a physicist at New York University. He has that long white hair. He's on television a lot. You probably know who I'm talking about. He was talking about the music of the planet on an interview just recently, and it was fascinating, where it's just like the planet circulating the sun create a tone or a musical tone of some kind.
Yeah, every planet has a signature radio signal. You can look it up on the internet. It's really interesting. The Earth sounds totally different than Mars.
Right, but the movement of them creates
harmonies
energy and music and a tone of some kind, and that affects everything. It affects them, affects us, affects the entire solar system. And in fact, the physicist was discussing that, lends a lot of credence to the astrologers who have been laughed at, officially for a long time, but unofficially they've been accepted by leaders of state and governments and civilizations for thousands of years. And you laugh when they say Jupiter's intersecting Saturn or conjuncting Saturn or And I have friends of mine that send me their literature on this, and I'm not an astrologer, but then when you start hearing the physics talking about the tones and the music and everything, and the fact there could be an impact on the planet or our own physical being, and it's like ignoring the moon, saying, "Oh, the moon has no effect on me." Well, I'm 98% water, and it seems to affect the tide, so I would think it would have some effect on me. And we know in emergency rooms at full moons, they're full of people that have problems. That's why they call it lunacy. So you just got to be open to all this stuff, and how you make money with this day to day. Well, I do some crazy things, like noticed a little peak in the moon. A full moon peak with the market just a few days ago, a trading peak, and new moon is a little low in the markets around the lunar cycle. A lot of commodity traders are very sensitive to the lunar positions because of the impact that it has on the earth and the crops and everything else. And of course the seasonal patterns, which I love, whether it's the equinoxes or the solstices, where are we in the markets during those periods of time, March, September, December, and June, where are we during those periods of time in the markets? And the earth is changing. The axis is not changing, but we're shifting around, and the seasons are changing, and that changes everything. Crops, people, markets, you name it. So anyway, fun stuff out there. Fun to keep on top of it, and hopefully we can tie it into my analysis, which I've been doing for over 40 years, and I enjoy looking at a lot of other things besides what you hear on the financial networks in terms of only the fundamentals of a company or the fundamentals of the economy. There's other forces at work, Jim, and I think you recognize that too.
Mark, thank you so much for chatting with us.
I love doing it. Thanks so much for having me.
My guest has been Mark Leibovit, editor and publisher of the Leibovit VR newsletters, also known as vrtrader.com. If you have any questions for Mark or any of our other guests, you can send them to info@howstreet.com. Find us on Twitter @HowStreet. Our YouTube channel is Talk Digital Network. We're also on Facebook. I'm Jim Goddard. Thank you for listening.
Comments made on HowStreet.com radio are an expression of opinion only and should not be construed in any matter whatsoever as recommendations to buy or sell any financial instrument at any time. Available online at TalkDigitalNetwork.com. HowStreet.com radio is a production of HowStreet Media Incorporated.